there's a phenomenon in psychology called the Dunning-Kruger Effect.
Yeah.
So I discovered the first neural correlates of it.
Are you kidding me?
No, I published it in 2021.
Are you kidding me?
No.
All right, explain it because it's one of the most phenomenal things that I've ever been exposed to.
I call it psychological gravity.
Awesome.
Why gravity? Because gravity is a physical force of nature in the world, and it affects everyone. You don't get to float around Earth. You are harnessed by gravity. You can beat gravity. You can jump, but it takes energy to beat that gravity, bring you down, and it will also bring you down too. An airplane can use energy to lift off. It takes energy to stay above gravity, but it will eventually have to come down because it's unsustainable. So when I say it's psychological gravity, it's a psychological phenomena that affects everyone like a physical law of Newtonian gravity does in the world of physics. Wow. Which is to say, I am talking to everyone, including me and you. There is no one that is not affected by this phenomena. Okay, so what's the phenomena? It is a twofold phenomena. The one part of it is that people have a tendency to overestimate their abilities or capabilities. And the other side is that people also have a tendency to underestimate their capabilities and performances. Now, the twist on it is that it tends to be, the phenomena is that the people who are the most competent and the most capable are the ones who underestimate themselves. And the people who are the most or the least competent are the ones who are the most overconfident. So in the science side of that, statistically, we call that a crossover interaction. So, and I'll unpack that as we move along here. So it's really problematic. So I reported these findings to Army Futures Command at the Association for the U.S. Army because I pitched it in the context of we can make better leaders by stopping overconfidence. And I had a picture of George Armstrong Custer on the slide. Because like
perfect example.
Well, this is all fun and games and lovey-dovey psychology stuff until lives are on the line.
That's right.
And overconfidence kills.
That's
which
right.
It did. It killed everybody in his command.
That's right.
But underconfidence kills too. If you don't go forward when you should, you miss an opportunity, A, for victory, but B, to save lives that could have escaped a bombing or, whatever scenario you want to, create. So both of them are essential to master for good leadership. And I needed a good military example of how the military doesn't always have that great calibration. Custer was a great one that was so far away that nobody would feel like I was talking to them in the room. And
there's actually a wonderful book that a British psychologist wrote about British officers making horrible calls and why. The psychology is, it's like psychology of bad leaders or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, unbelievable.
And so this is actually one of the things, if I wouldn't have been fired, I was writing grants and projects. I wanted to apply this actually in a leadership context, which our study was in a basic science way. It wasn't an applied way of leaders, but I'm like, this is the next step. We have to do these kind of research studies because it could be gangbusters. So what we found in our study is, and what the psychological phenomenon of the Dunning-Kruger effect is that our least competent think they're the best, sort of your braggadocios. And our most competent think they're the worst. So I call them your humble heroes. So, and we see this in all tracks of life, right? If you talk to Michael Jordan, he knows he's Michael Jordan. He might be, some people might think he's arrogant, but he's just confident. He's actually a reasonably humble guy because he knows it. And if you talk to your tier one guys, like
all humble,
look, they're, you get them all around the bar, you guys will razz each other in quiet, but like the humbleness probably climbs as you climb that ladder.
100%. I mean, I think there's a existence within the operational community that it's like, your humility is tempered because it's happening in real time. But the guys, the really amazing operators that I know, as soon as they separate from that world, unbelievably humble in terms of
just to take it back to the guy you mentioned, Colonel Charlie Plum, one of the things that was incredible for me was his humility about his whole scenario. And he made a comment in a show that we did together during COVID about isolation and confinement. And I was very like deferential because he's like, well, you've done some time too. I'm like, I did a few weeks. Like, I'm not going to sit here with you and talk about doing time. But
he's amazing.
But he said, no. He's like, you don't understand, Rick. Like, time, if you did one day, time is time. And he said that he understood that everybody has their own Hanoi Hilton. Everybody has their own prison. We're not operating all at the same level. So he had such a large cup of water that could hold so much fluid that it took 4 years to fill. But somebody else, he's like, you might be in an abusive relationship at home.
That's right.
That is the same prison and the same resilience that you're building.
Genius,
and he could understand that with the humility rather than being like, well, I did this. And he isn't, as you know, he's not that guy.
No.
And so with Dunning-Kruger, you have this famous phenomena. It's captured in biblical scripture. Confucius, Shakespeare famously said, the fool thinks he's wise, but the wise man knows himself to be a fool. And I was just back from the NASA astronaut interview process in 2016. And it was reasonable that I could have been picked up because I just interviewed in the finals for it. Fortunately, I had to go up against Johnny Kim and Frank Rubio, and they beat me pretty good.
Those are two very healthy competitors. Yeah, yeah.
I went home to my university job, and I said, I probably won't be able to run any more scientific studies anymore. Like, what would I run again? And 1 year to run whatever study you can do. And I had a student who came and actually demonstrated this effect. She was complaining about some grades she got in a test, but she's like, but I've always just gotten A's on all my papers. I'm like, well, here's why you got an F. Like, here's the reasons it didn't connect. She was overconfident because she didn't have the skills to know the areas that were failing short. And so I said, I wonder what the brain activity is associated with this. And I went and I looked at, and it turns out there weren't any studies of these phenomena.
Wow.
And so I designed one because I'm like, this may be like, I could never do another science. I'll just be a lab rat for NASA the rest of my life.
Right.
Possibly. And so let's do it. And I didn't ask for any like research funding. I didn't get bogged down in the bureaucracy. We ended up getting funding later for it. It took a long time of being told no. We just did it. It was a beautiful, badass part of science. We just did it. And so we built a study. It was a memory study. And we'd ask people every 10 trials of their memory decisions to say, how well do you think you're performing compared to everyone? And so we replicated that crossover finding. So the best performers said they were performing not so great, and vice versa. The people performing the worst on the memory test thought they were doing great.
Yep.
But what was really interesting was two patterns of results. One was behavioral response times, and the other was the brain activity. First, the behavioral response times. How fast people respond to those judgments. You mimic the exact same crossover pattern of results. So the people who are your humble heroes, they were slowest in speed to press the button to say, I'm doing the best. They were also fastest to say, I'm doing the worst. And your braggadocios, the people who had the illusion of being better, they were fastest to say, I'm the greatest. And slowest to say, I'm the worst. They were the worst.
Wow.
And I mean, that tracks. And anybody who has worked like you have with high-performing people,
right.
You've also, it's exactly how you see things manifest.
That's what you focus on, that evaluation. And that's how you begin to break the individual down or build them up, is in that space, in that crossover. That's what I look for.
Yeah. So the problem that we've had psychologically is we've known about this phenomena for decades.
Yep.
And they've come up with theories to explain why. And and we reasoned in reading the literature that the theoretical accounts for it were garbage, because all they came up with was the account of it being, they called reach around knowledge, that you have some knowledge and it's allowing you to reach around to some guess that you're going to do. Or they said basically blissful ignorance, like you don't know, so you're blissfully overconfident. To me, that's not a well designed and empirically strong construct of a psychological construct. That just doesn't, to me, that was flimsy and weak. So we recorded brain activity of these judgments, and we found two patterns of effects. We actually found different brain activity for these different judgments of the people doing these things. And what we found was a pattern of activity in the overestimators, the people who are braggadocios, people, who think they're great, and aren't. that pattern of activity was very frontal in the brain. It was very kind of what we call early in time. So when the stimulus and the judgment happens, it happened very fast, close to that judgment, about 400 milliseconds.
Wow.
And what was interesting
fast.
What was interesting about that pattern of brain activity is it's the same pattern of brain activity that we see when people are in memory studies and are using a kind of memory we call familiarity, which I mentioned because your earlier comment made me kind of put a tack in returning to this, because it's the using of our just intuition. They're just kind of feeling that they're remembering something that they're not. They're not performing as well, but they think they are. And so how are they arriving at this judgment? It's because their decision is governed by the sense that this information just seems familiar. Okay. But how are the best performers actually constraining themselves and holding themselves back actually, and saying, well, actually they're not accurate, but they're saying they're underperforming. They didn't show that pattern of activity. They showed a pattern in the back left parietal area of the brain later in time, about 600 and 900 milliseconds.
Why in the parietal region?
Well, why is a deep question. I'm not sure I know the exact answer, but what I can tell you is that pattern of activity is the same pattern of activity that we see typically in memory studies when they use a different kind of memory process called recollection. Recollection is a clear, distinctive retrieval of the context woven together with the information from the past. That is, the details. You can remember everything about it. It doesn't just seem fuzzy. Oh, I think I know you from somewhere, don't I? You seem very familiar. Instead,
this place, this time, this was the
exactly.
Okay.
And so, very different kind of memory. Those people are humble heroes. Were making their judgments and performance based upon that kind of a brain process, which told us a couple things. It told us that they were constraining their judgments and estimations of their own performance relative to others with clear details and specificity, versus people were jumping to these wild conclusions of being great because it was actually fuzzy. And so they were using this intuition without facts, without information.
Wow.
And it was leading them down the primrose path of thinking they were better than they were. And we kind of took the next leap of saying, we presumed that they probably encoded the information differently. That is to say, like in real world applications, probably when you study better and you know the material better,
preparation,
you're going to remember the details.
Yep.
Those details are also going to constrain you towards getting out too far in front of your skis, because you're also going to know the information well enough to where you also know what you don't know.
Yeah.
And so you're like,
and you're honest about it.
Well, in this case, they were falsely honest, like that, right?
The people that thought they were better than they were.
No, those people were not honest about it.
The people that were restrictive in their assessment of their capability, they actually lowered.
Yeah.
They weren't honest about how good they were.
Yeah.
Was it a protective? Is it a protective?
I think it was just, like anything, when you know what you don't know.
Or is it humility? Is it part of those moral boundaries, right?
Kind of, I think it's like the Socratic method, Socrates, right? He knows when you know what you don't know, it's only because you studied and you put the work in. You went to, you took the long journey in life. You put the work in. Oh my God. And you went through SQT. You did you now know who you are. Or maybe you don't until after combat, but like you put the work in your journey to where now you have the constraint to realize Socratically, there's a lot I don't know.
Yeah.
So, but that's only because you know so much. Yeah. So the people who are our braggadocios, they hadn't gone on that metaphorical journey. I would say that they probably didn't encode the information well enough. And so it allows them to just use their intuition to falsely jump to conclusions and erroneously think they're better than they are. Now you can see where I applied this towards the military leadership side.
That's right.
When I talked to the Army Futures Command, I was like, I think you want your leaders to be constrained and not to be the ones who maybe who are making decisions out of intuition because they think it feels right because maybe they didn't study as well.
How do you teach constraint or restraint? It's not constraint, it's restraint, right?
A little bit of both. You're constraining your decisions based upon details, facts, and information based on experience.